All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The Design Review Board public meeting of October 25th, 2018 is called to order. Please refrain from talking amongst yourselves during the meeting, and please turn off or put on vibrate all cell phones at this time. If you need to talk, please leave the meeting room. Anyone who wishes to speak, including applicants on any of the applications to be reviewed today, are asked to completely fill out one of the speaker's cards provided at the table by the front door and submit it to staff. You'll be called to speak by the board when your case is called. Anyone who wishes to be re-noticed about a project in the event of a return for redesign will need to completely fill out one of the postcards provided at the table by the front door and submit it to staff. Current DRB agendas are available by visiting our website at www.glendaleca.gov. A handout describing the procedures of the meeting, possible board decisions, and DRB appeal is available from staff. Roll call. Ms. Arzumanian.
Here.
Mr. Benlian. Absent. Mr. Charchian.
Yes.
Mr. Malikian. Here. Mr. Simonian. Absent.
I meant here.
I'm sorry?
I meant here instead of yes.
Okay. Report regarding the posting of the agenda. The agenda for this meeting was posted on the bulletin board outside City Hall at or before 5 p.m. on October 18, 2018. Oral communications. Do we have any slips?
I do not have any slips.
Okay. Is there anybody in the audience that wants to speak on an item not a part of the agenda? Nothing. Okay. So we are down to the staff announcements. I don't have any staff announcements, and then we are down to the design review cases for tonight, the two.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. And what we're going to need to do, folks, is we're going to need to take the items out of order. One of the board members is running a little late. I have to recuse myself for the first item on the calendar. Therefore, we're going to take them out of order and take PDR 1817461, which is the property located on Sierra Vista Avenue first. And can we get the staff report on that?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the Design Review Board. The initial item this evening is case number PDR 1817461. It's a review of a proposal to construct a new two-story 1,960 square foot single-family residence, a detached 430 square foot garage, and a 272 square foot covered patio. The subject lot is 6,500 square feet and is zoned R1 with a floor area ratio District 2. Just for clarification purposes, the existing residence on the site will not be entirely demolished. However, enough of it will be removed for the project to be considered a new house, new single-family house. Additionally, at some point, a hobby room and cabana were constructed on the site and will be removed as part of the project. The subject site is located at 3509 Sierra Vista Drive, and the plans are behind you on your left side. To the west. With regard to the site planning for the project, staff is in support of the project as it maintains the predominant 30-foot street front setback and the rear detached garage location. Staff suggests that new foundation planting be installed at the front of the residence when construction is complete, and that the wall and gate that are being proposed south of the residence be moved further west to be in line with the proposed master bedroom addition. The mass and scale of the project is appropriate. because the second story is set back approximately 43 feet from the street and is stepped back from the first floor on the side, both side elevations. The project is located in a one-story neighborhood, and consideration should be made to further step back the second story at the front elevation to better integrate this project into the surrounding neighborhood, and also consider reducing the roof pitch to a 3 and 12 pitch to minimize the mass of the building, and also allow the front entry porch roof to be continuous. Finally, staff believes that the design and detailing of the project is appropriate as high-quality material are proposed and windows are recessed into the facade. Materials used in the project include wood windows, barrel tile roofing, copper gutters, and smooth finish stucco. Staff suggests that the westernmost window of bedroom 2 on the second floor be moved further east so that more headroom is provided between the window and the roof eave. The conditions, or the suggested conditions and considerations are included in the staff report. I can either read them and discuss them, or I can stop and my presentation is finished.
I do have a question.
Sure.
Can you explain, I'm trying to understand the condition number 2.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain where exactly are we talking about, the proposed
Sure.
walls?
Let me get this. So, condition 2, there is a existing wood fence and gate at this location, south of the house. They are wanting to replace it, which we're concurring with, but we're suggesting that they replace it in this area as opposed to further toward the front yard.
Am I reading
that make sense?
this correctly? It says proposed wall/garage south of residence shall be moved further. So there's no garage or a wall garage. So I'm trying to understand.
Let me see.
Proposed wall/garage south of
Oh.
residence shall be moved.
I can understand why you're confused.
Okay.
I meant the proposed wall/gate, not
Oh,
garage.
okay. All right. Okay. All right.
So, sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. And I'm keep on looking for it, trying to find a garage, but okay.
Actually, before the applicant speaks, we did get, I believe, 3 emails in support of the project, and then one email just came in from the homeowners association, and that's on your desk as well. I wasn't able to fully read that one.
Okay. Are there any questions for staff? I have a couple of quick questions. On the neighborhoods survey,
Yes.
the property is indicated as 1 story. Is that an error, or am I reading that incorrectly?
The existing property is 1 story.
Okay. So
Or the house on the existing property is currently 1
okay,
story.
sure. All right, so they didn't need to change that to 2-story for their
On
proposed?
the chart, I think most people do.
Gotcha.
I don't think it's a
Okay. And then, what is the slope? Is there a slope to this lot? I mean,
Well, the street does slope down from the north to the south.
sure.
There may be a slight elevation change going from the front of the lot to the back of the lot, I don't think it's much, but lots to the north are a little bit higher. It-
But the lot itself, there's, from your knowledge, there's no significant elevation
No.
changes or anything like
No.
that on that lot? Okay, thank you. With no further questions for staff, we'll go ahead and open up the public comment portion of the hearing and invite the applicant to come up. Demery Matthews?
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Demery Matthews. I'm the designer on this project. And first of all, thank you, board members, for your time. And thank you, planning staff, for your time and, sorry, and direction on this project. There's been great effort to get to the point where we gained staff recommendation for approval. It's been no small feat, and I've been working on two-story additions in this particular neighborhood for about 12 years. There's a lot to consider, and ultimately I do want to get to addressing the various conditions and considerations on the report. But first I wanted to give you a little bit of the background on this project in terms of what it's taken to get to this point. The homeowners sketched up a design for their growing family, and the existing house is 878 square feet, so it's really quite tiny. And that puts them at a bit of a disadvantage, because if they already had a home that was in the 22% floor area ratio, we wouldn't be talking about a very big addition here to meet their needs. But because they're coming from such a smaller starting point, it's a leap. And that makes it kind of seem like a bigger project, and it gives staff and myself a lot more to kind of grapple with. Along those lines, though, they did originally desire to maintain more of the existing conditions. They'd hoped to keep their existing 4-foot side yard setback on the south. They'd planned to keep their existing garage. That existing hobby house is permitted. There's an orange tree that gets removed when we enlarge the garage. Things like that that we were trying to avoid, and the way we were going to do that was try to not trigger that 50% rule. We were going to try to do this project in a couple of phases over the course of maybe a decade or half a decade. But that design suffered because the existing house is a flat roof with parapets, and when we looked at building up, 2-story flat roof was pretty boxy. When we looked at doing the second floor as a sloped roof with the first floor maintained as a flat roof, it looked mishmashy. It didn't really relate well. And ultimately we just decided, and staff actually encouraged us to just go all in, rip the roof off, and that triggers the 50%. So one by one, everything they'd hoped to maintain did end up being affected. And we were encouraged to apply for, and we were even granted at one point an administrative exception for the 4-foot setback. But that turned out to be a mistake because of new construction. The best we could hope for would be a 5-foot setback from the required 6-foot. And that we were discouraged for applying for, because once you're lopping off 12 inches of the existing house, it's kind of hard to argue why you wouldn't just lop off 24 inches. Having said that, that was a bit of a heartache for the homeowner who wanted to maximize their property. Anyway, all that to say, the hope had been to maintain more of the existing conditions, to save money, but also to maximize the property. Adding back seems like the obvious question people keep saying to us: why build up? Well, adding back really removed too much of their valuable yard space. So then the goal becomes, how do we improve this property, add value to it, add value to the neighborhood? And the decision was to do a tasteful 2-story design. To that end, the homeowner will speak to you in a little bit, and he is a custom home, high-end custom home builder. So he's very familiar with, beautiful detailing, quality craftsmanship, finishes. I think our material board speaks to that. And if you have questions on any of that, I really think he would be a great person to address a lot of that. The other conviction the homeowners have, in addition to beautiful ultimate design work, is they both want to keep that outdoor living space. They're raising their kids in this home, and they utilize that. And the reason I bring that up is because in these hearings, we are aware that second floor additions receive opposition, that you guys hear a lot about it, but there are plenty of folks who are in support of tastefully designed second-story additions. Plenty of us who support our zoning codes to allow for this, to develop our homes in this manner, and we value, our right to maintain our yard and still increase the size of our home for growing families. There are neighbors here to speak in support of the project and along those lines as well. But specifically to the report, on page 2, in that chart, it says that all the homes are 1 story, but I do want to draw to your attention, Roger put a note in there that there's a 2-story duplex within 300 linear feet. So they aren't all 1-story homes. Also, when we originally submitted, before we started working with staff, we were at 32% FAR, and we've brought that down. We're aware that we could build up to 40%. That was never our goal. We are aware that the surrounding homes are around 22% average. 30% falls closer to that and feels like it allows them to get what they need out of this home without being excessive. And it's well below what's allowed. I do want to address that issue about the wall on the side yard that was explained to you guys. One of the conditions was to have it be stucco to match the existing. That's fine. We have no problem with that. But as far as pushing it further back, the homeowner would really like to keep it where we've drawn it. The fence is actually 12 inches from the corner, so the corner has some definition. We're talking about building the new wall further 18 inches. So there will be some definition there, some relief, and then that relief will be even greater when we build that porch out in front of the house. The house is actually set back 35 feet. The porch brings it to the 30 feet, whereas neighbors' homes are at 30 feet. The wall we're talking about then is actually set back. The thing also to note is the space behind there is where they're going to locate their condensers, their meters. So it's a functioning space. It's a purposeful space. They need it there, and they would like to use the wall to conceal those pieces of equipment from street view. Also, when you look at the overall elevation, I realize the goal in setting walls and fences back is undulation. The fence or the gate on their driveway side is pushed way back. So we really create quite a lot of undulation that's not even typical in the fabric of this neighborhood. The other thing with massing and scale, it says on there that there are only 1-story homes in the neighborhood, and as I mentioned, there aren't. There are several 2-story homes that dot the neighborhood. So I'm sure you're aware of that. We did work with planning extensively, though, to address the idea of bringing the second floor inward. And while it's predominantly 1-story in this neighborhood, it's not only 1-story. It notes the 30-foot setback on the ground floor. It notes it's 43'10" on the second floor from the front. Then the second floor pushes back further, another 8'10". So there's more of the second floor that is set at 53 feet from the front, which is quite a lot. The 6-foot side yard on setback I already talked about. Then we pulled the second floor in even further from that. And then as far as the north setback, 10 feet. This neighborhood has a lot of 8-foot and 9-foot driveways. We're doing a 10-foot. And then on our second floor, we used to have it cantilevering over that driveway. We pulled it back, not once, but twice in various design moves to reduce massing. Anyway, I guess what I want to just say is if you guys go down the path of talking about reducing second floor massing, I would like to have an opportunity to discuss further how that impacts where the chimney is located and window proportions, how it has a domino effect to interior spaces that are thoughtfully laid out per their interior design ideals. Just going through the list, the roof forms item 4 and 12 versus 3 and 12. I realize that's a consideration, and I'm hoping it remains a consideration because it's a big deal to the homeowner, and he'll speak on that more. Is that my time?
That is your time.
Okay, do you want me to address the conditions or no?
No, I have some questions.
Okay, great.
So, the window details that you provided here, is this the detail that you want to follow, or is the sketch that you've provided on your plans?
I believe we have casement.
So right now, the way these images are, and when I'm looking at your
Yeah, it's,
renderings, it seems that the photos are more
they're more like
closer
that one, yes.
than the details that you have does not match, because you're wrapping the entire facade with wood moldings and,
In one of those pictures or in all of them?
you know, and this details that you provided. So I just need to understand which I'm looking at. If this is the window casement details that we're gonna be reviewing, then the elevations don't match this.
Okay, so the rendering shows it without the casing, you're right. The elevations show it with the casing, without, right? Without, it's the way it should be, so I should remove that casing on my
So
elevations.
the details should be adjusted. Okay. Do you have a survey of the property?
They did not get a survey.
Okay, so then let me ask you a question. On your section or your side elevation that I'm looking at, you're showing from the front to back, there's about a foot or so difference in elevation change. How did you come up with that?
Because they step into their house off of 2 steps up, and they step out the back.
Okay, so if
About
that's the
3.5.
case, then you're saying that when I'm looking at your rear elevation, which is the west elevation, you have 3 steps going down to the ground, correct?
Plus the
Plus
threshold,
the
threshold is up.
right?
Yeah.
So now, if you look at your floor plan or the side plan, let's say, look at your ground proposed floor plan, you're only showing 2 steps there. You have a landing, edge of that deck, and then you have 1 step. That means you have another step that you're missing, which that means your step is pretty much right into the garage. So does that mean that
2, 3. Okay, so
the garage needs to be moved back?
no. Okay, so when the existing floor plan shows 3 steps down. So my elevation then should only show 3 steps down.
Yeah, but the floor plan that I'm looking at has only 2 steps.
Plus the threshold 6 inch, so we'll step out.
So the elevation is incorrect.
Plans are correct. The elevation step down should only have,
You have a step down from the threshold. You
it
come to
should
the
probably
deck.
only have the 2 steps down in addition to the threshold unless we take the whole thing up, even with the finished floor.
No, I don't mind that, but what I'm saying is the way that the elevation is showing, you have the threshold, step down to the deck, and then from the deck, you have a step, 1 step, and then another step, and then you land on the ground. That's how the elevation is showing.
3 risers.
3 risers, so, 4 risers, actually.
4 risers including the threshold step.
1, 2, 3, 4, correct. So now, when you look at your elevation, you only have 1 and 2 risers. I mean, sorry, your floor plan.
Right, so the existing house has 3 risers.
Okay.
That's what it should be.
That's what it should be. So, we should somehow address if the garage needs to move back, if we, because the way it's drawn, it's not gonna fit.
So the garage is, oh, you mean moved back on the site entirely?
Yeah, I mean, there's no way you're gonna be able to have the landing and then the 3 steps going down.
Okay, we only need 3 steps. So we either come down a step when we first step out and do
Okay.
the 2 that show in plan, and that works.
Okay.
Or we
then
shift it
okay.
back, which I don't think
Take
we
a
want
look
to do.
at the elevation, you'll see what I'm saying. So the elevation has 4 right now, so it's showing 4. Anyways, okay.
Yes.
That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. In regards to the raised foundation, because it seems as though you have a crawl space, can you just kind of elaborate what the existing home structure is?
It is a raised foundation.
And is it the same finished floor as what you are proposing in your
Yes, it
design?
is. Yes, it is, because a lot of the existing floor plate does remain.
I see. And is there a drawing that depicts how much of the existing as overlaid on the proposed? Which drawing should I look at?
Look at the site plan drawing, and it's the area that's white that's not hatched, but it's also got some second story over it that has a a diagonal hatch.
Okay. And as far as the roof is concerned, your pitch, I think you have a, what, 4 to
4 and
12?
12.
Are you able to do a 3 and 12 with this roof material?
So that's actually what I was going to get to before my time ran out. Two things I wanted to point out is that our height at the maximum ridge peak is 23'6" and allowable is 28. So we're well under that 28 feet. And I don't know why staff is recommending 3 and 12, or I guess it was a consideration. Or was it a condition? Consideration. Because it does affect how well water sloughs off there, but more importantly, it also affects the amount of concrete you see in the grouting. And that's why I wanted Mr. Tybert to talk to you about that, because he installs those roofs all the time and has strong opinion about the way it looks. Even just dropping that inch per foot flattens it from an eye perspective. You end up seeing less tile and more of that grout in between the tiles, if that makes sense. And a 4 and 12 is not a steep roof. It's actually a really, it's a good roof slope for a tiled roof. It's common.
I have no more questions.
Any
I
other
don't think
questions?
that was your question, right? So you wanted to know.
I wanted to know if it's possible to go to a 3 and 12. From what I
Possible,
understand,
yes.
it is possible, but she's saying aesthetically you see
So,
more.
so the manufacturer will still give you the warranty for the 3 and 12?
Well,
I think
Mr.
we have a,
Mr.
Yeah.
Tybert will have his opportunity. So,
Okay,
any other
yeah.
questions? Okay. Thank you. Next speaker.
did you have a question about, because one of the conditions was relative to the overhang. Did I need to
I
clarify?
think your time is up and we don't
Okay,
have
I
any.
just, if you need
You'll have some
clarification.
time at the end for rebuttal. If that
Okay.
comes up, then you can
Great,
discuss
thank
it.
you.
Ben Tybert? Come on up. State your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Ben Tybert. My wife over here is Tenley. We're the homeowners. Again, I want to say thank you for being here, taking the time. Thank you guys for being here, all the time and energy you guys have put into this project, to get us to where we are. And I also want to say thank you to Demry. Like, she's done a really great job, and I want to publicly say I'm really happy with the work that you've done, and we appreciate all the ups and downs, and we're happy with you, so thank you. Just want to give you a little bit of background. Tenley and I had an amazing opportunity to purchase the house of our dreams, not because of the house, but because of the neighborhood. We love the neighborhood, we love the neighbors, and it's a family-oriented neighborhood, and we want to raise a family there. We have a 2.5-year-old daughter, and sorry, did I not state my name? I
You did.
Okay. I saw it. Is that a 1-minute thing?
That's a timer, but it's okay. Keep going.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, yeah, we have a growing family. We don't have a whole lot of space. We'd love to add on. 3 things that we really wanted to, we had a conviction about was, 1, we wanted to do something that was appropriate for the neighborhood, something that didn't stand out as an outlier, but something that brought value and was tastefully done. Second thing was to have function, something that has enough space for us to raise a family. And the third was to gain as much space in the yard as possible. Living in Southern California, being able to utilize a space almost year-round and letting our children grow up in a comfortable, safe environment in our backyard. So for that reason, we chose to go up and not out as far, and trying to be as modest as possible with the house. And I hope that we have achieved that. So,
Please wrap up.
yep, just want to say, if you're worried about the conditions of the house and the materials and what's going to be done, this is what I do for a living. This is a labor of love, not a starter home. It's a forever home. And this is what we want to hopefully accomplish, and hopefully we gain your support in that.
Okay, thank you, sir. I think we have some questions from
Yeah, I
staff.
have a
Mr.
question.
Simonia?
You indicated that you build, or they indicated that you build custom homes.
Yes.
And so I'm looking at the site plan, and as depicted, there's, say, a third of the floor plan would be the existing one level, and then you're adding to that towards the rear,
Mm-hmm.
and then also to that towards the front.
The patios.
How much of that house is realistically, how much of those floor joists are realistically going to stay?
Yeah, the good thing is it was original redwood joists, so the structure's good. I've been under the house. We installed white oak hardwood, and so it's a really nice material. The layout of the kitchen is staying very similar, and so the cabinetry is going to be able to be salvaged. It's somewhat new, and like Demery had talked about, this has been a development, right? So we didn't start.
No, I get it,
With this
and so just in the spirit of time, so have you had a structural engineer kind of look at how the new footings are going to react with the old footings and how this structure will kind of go through seismic
Yeah.
code, et cetera? Because you have an old structure that you're adding on to, and then you're going second level.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of having a hard time understanding how much of that floor space you're going to be able to salvage, really.
Yeah, the good thing is, as far as a structural engineer goes, most of the exterior walls are new. Most of the interior walls are going to be adjusted, and the space is going to be salvaged there. I have not had a structural engineer, because we don't have approved plans. I mean, we've gone through a lot of money so far. We'd like to have approved set of plans, and then we'll deal with the structural engineer issues when we get there.
And the reason why I ask is because obviously the existing home has a few steps going up. It has a raised floor,
Mhm.
which is adding to the height of the structure. Then you're going 2 stories, and that's adding more height. And so now we're all predicating that on the existing floor plate, whereas in my opinion, I don't know how much of that is going to be theoretically saved anyways. The second part of my question that I wanted to ask was, you must have put tile in that's 3 to 12 as far as the slope is concerned, right? That's
Sure, I have installed 3 to 12 tile for the two reasons why I would say not to go 3 and 12. One is you get a different type of surface, so you get more color from the tile if it's at a 4 and 12 than a 3 and 12. Like Demery said, you get a lot more of the mortar and a more dirty look. The other reason was we specifically did a different pitch for the front patio, a 2 and 12, compared to the 4 and 12, so that it doesn't seem like one massive roof. On the conditions, it says we'd like to see that continuous. Personally, and architecture is a little bit subjective, personally, I think I'd rather see a break there so that you can see the difference between the patio and the house, and so you don't have one giant massing.
And the last question I have is, it's somewhat unusual to do this kind of addition without a survey because, you know, these lots are narrow. There's not a lot of room to play with, especially when you're working with an existing structure, garages, et cetera. Sometimes you're, you know, working with inches. And so it's somewhat odd to go all the way through DRB, you know, without a survey because, you know, once you get a survey, if things change, you will have to come back if it's substantial.
Absolutely, and we feel comfortable in that we have kept it so far under, especially the roof height and the setbacks, that we feel comfortable with that space. We don't think that we left it with those inches. We left 6 to 8 inches, and you know, in my experience, a survey is off by a couple inches, usually not a couple feet.
Surveys are not off by a few inches. They're usually pretty smack on. That's the whole point of a
No,
survey.
no, no, I'm saying like a site, like when I see a property line wall, I can usually determine that that property line wall is within a couple inches of the actual survey line, right? Not a couple feet off.
Okay, I have no more questions.
You're thinking more about elevation points, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have a slope, you have steps going up, you have all those things. that
Any other
we talked
questions?
about.
So I have one question, has to do with the finishings. I'm pleased to see that you're proposing, or the designer's proposing the copper downspouts. But it says gutter, but I'm assuming that you are going to be using copper
Copper flashing, copper
gutters,
copper
right?
downspout
Okay,
for
good.
Spanish style.
So it's a half round,
Yep.
you know, and it'll be.
There's
at
an
the-
image on the board, on that board, in the top, on the paper you're holding, right there, top, right there.
Oh, here, okay. So, just one, the placement of these downspouts is a little bit, you need to kind of look into that, especially the one that you're putting right next to the patio door that is coming out, the area that I was questioning about the steps.
On the back?
Like literally you're putting right, there's like a 6-inch left, so you, and then if the water comes down there, you're right there. And if you have to raise I don't recommend you putting it at that location. But the other thing, going back to the windows, the sill of these windows, I really like the images and I really like the details. So none of these details work that it's shown, so I'm going to cross that out. I'm going to rely on the images.
That's fair, and I think
Okay.
the details were a typical detail, not desired. And the elevation that you were talking about before, the elevation on here is wrong. There's an
Right.
18-inch step from the back threshold to the garage. So 3 steps is correct. So, but on the elevation here, it shows 4. So the front shows 3, and the back says
So
4.
you have a step down from the threshold, you're on the deck, and then from the deck, that's how the elevation is showing. So from the deck, you're going
Has
down
another 12 inches.
one step, another step. So
Correct.
I think,
So it's a total of 18 inches.
right, well, no, it's 1 step, 2 step, and then 3 steps.
Yeah, so 3 risers.
So the 3 risers, but on the plan, it's only showing
You're right.
1 step, so that means 2 risers. So if you add the 3rd riser, then that means you're just gonna have like this much left between the step and the garage. So the garage needs to be pushed back. So one or the other, so we just have to figure it out.
Okay, we'll figure it out.
And then that brings me to my question. You know, you've mentioned that you wanted to maximize the backyard space, right? But you've decided to put the garage closer to the house and create your backyard really behind the garage and behind the patio area. What's the thinking behind that?
Well, actually, originally we wanted to keep the hobby house, which was permitted in 1956, and the not carport, the patio in the back that's existing now. I don't think I have any pictures of that. Because of the new codes and setbacks, I have to bring everything 6 feet onto the property. And so to maximize the space, it made most sense to have an outdoor living area closer to the house and the yard in the back, because I don't have to pull a structure and lose 6 feet off the back wall.
Okay,
Does that make
makes
sense?
sense, yeah. Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, sir. Ernie Demis.
Hi, I'm Ernie Demis. I'm a next-door neighbor on the south side, and I'm just here to give my support for the project. I think it's a beautiful design, great neighbors. These are tiny houses. My house is small, and theirs is even smaller than mine, and it's a growing family, and I think they have a beautiful idea, and I'm looking forward to keeping them as neighbors for a long time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Andy Haynes.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Andy Haynes. Like Ernie, I am the Tybert's neighbor to the north, and I myself also have young children. We spend a lot of time in the yards, front and back, socializing with our neighbors. It's a pretty great community where we live. Like Ben, like Ernie, I really do appreciate the neighborhood and the family quality that it offers to us young families that are trying to get a start here. And in good faith to keep them as my neighbors, I would love for them to be able to move forward with their project so we can keep our relationship growing and raising our families together.
Okay. I have one question. What are your thoughts about this becoming a 2-story home in a predominantly 1-story neighborhood?
I think I know there are 2 stories within our neighborhood. There's one directly up the street from us on the same side of the street. I personally am not too drawn to its architectural style, but it is a 2-story, and it seems to be not designed that well. I think in the way that these guys have worked with Demery to best represent the community without seeming like it's taking over in size, they're going to get the square footage that they need without detriment to the design of the community. I think it's just
Okay.
fine.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, seeing no other speaker cards, Mr. Oh, where did I put that? Is it Demery has a 2-minute rebuttal?
Well, there were only supporters.
Well, actually, yeah, do you want,
I don't need to rebut
there's
anything.
nothing to rebut.
Did you want me to
Um,
address the couple other conditions that didn't come up?
No,
Okay,
thank you.
then I'm here if
Thank-
you have questions.
Thank you for clarifying. When I'm automatically there because I did think I read something on the emails, but obviously that's for us. Okay, let's go ahead and close the public comment portion of the hearing and open it to deliberations. Who would like to start?
I can get started. So overall, I really like the project. I think it's designed well. I like the second story, how it's stepping back, how it's fitting within the footprints, and how they've kind of brought the whole building, kind of filled in the gap, and like a Tetris puzzle, like, you know, filling in the corners. So I'm overall I'm supportive of the project. So I just want to go down the list and add a couple of more conditions, if I may.
Please.
So I want to go down the list of staff's conditions. So on the number 1, reduce or eliminate eave overhangs in the gable sides of the roof. I'm okay with that. So I think it would help. As far as the second one, I think that I would like to move that to as a consideration rather than condition. The third, the location of westernmost window of the bedroom number 2, move further east. Again, I'm fine with it, but I think it's more of a function of the inside, so I don't know if it's going to really impact the interior function, so I'll just leave it up to the applicant, so I will move that also to the consideration. Number 4, foundation planting shall be installed in front of, I don't mind that, so I will leave that as a condition. And number 5, remove or consider downspouts. Again, that can be as a consideration. I think if it's really a nice copper downspouts, and I think it can work well with the design itself. Also want to make sure and somehow we address the additional step, which is going to most probably going to move the garage back, which if that happens, hopefully staff can review it and okay, that doesn't have to come back to us. So I'm okay with that. And then also the window, the casement details, I will cross that out completely and just go with the images that they provided with the material board. And so it will be bull-nosed or wrapped around stucco with recessed or inset window block windows. And the sill of the windows would be as it's shown or as it's depicted on the photo, which would be more substantial wood exposed and not beveled or as much more straighter as it's in the picture. Other than that, I think I'm fine with.
Okay. Is there support? There's no objection to any of those conditions, correct? I'm not hearing any. Okay.
I would have some more additional thoughts,
Mr. Simon?
but I didn't really have a particular issue with any of the conditions or conditions being moved as considerations. When the designer or architect, I'm not sure, indicated that no survey was done, that was a bit alarming for me, especially when we have these kind of sites that we have raised foundation or raised platform. We're adding a second story, we're adding to the existing first story. We have a tight site to work with, there's building separations, and so it's a risky move not to have a survey. Insofar as the design itself is concerned, I like the overall design, I like the overall feel, and the materials as depicted on the color photos, I think do a very good job of allowing us to visualize the final product. Those are high-end materials, so I think if we make those part of the record, that would bode well. And the reason the height of the building, not so much in general feet and inches, just putting that aside, but in perception, seems top-heavy to me. So when I'm looking at the 2-story elevations, especially, you know, this image and this image, and to a certain extent this image, seems top-heavy, especially with the roofs. And that's why I was kind of talking about the pitches of the roofs. And of course, the floor, the raised floor just adds to it. Personally, when we're looking at the site plan where this much of it is the existing, this much of it is going to be addition on both sides. And there's going to be a second floor, and the interior walls are being repositioned. I don't really see how they're going to be able to salvage those, those footings and joists. So in my opinion, I think the entire first floor at some point is going to get reframed, or a majority of it's going to get reframed. I do appreciate the homeowner trying to salvage it, and I understand it. It's, you're trying to do it in the most economical way possible, but reality is that it is probably going to get redone at some point. So to me, the raised floor is an issue. And also this rear part, I think, is somewhat of an awkward part, but it is the rear, so I'm not as worried about it, especially if the neighbors are in support of it. But the way this kind of cantilevers and the way it kind of bisects this little roof over the rear patio, and you just get a better sense of it from this elevation, again, seems odd and seems heavy. So to me, I think the 3 and 12 would at least help, and if possible, to try to minimize this raised floor as much as possible, I think would help as well, besides everything else Mr. Malecki talked about.
Ms. Harzamian?
All right. It's always good to see neighbors here in support of project. Thank you for making the time. I didn't want to interrupt Mr. Malikian, but what's the reason for number 3, the condition 3? Why was it proposed as a condition? Is it just a functional? Or
No, I mean, consideration, it was, in the location
No, I
it
know.
was.
Why is it condition?
So the
Like,
question to the
is it
staff
that-
is, what's
That's
the
more of a
thinking
staff.
behind that?
Yeah.
The
condition?
thinking behind that was, if you look at it would be the south elevation, there's not a whole bunch of room on the farthest window, the most western window, between the top of the window and the edge of the roof. And it's more of an aesthetic concern than anything else.
And
Yeah, so-
lined up with the window below, more or less. It kind of adds to that
Potentially.
same-
And it's just so close to the corner.
Yeah, and that cantilever doesn't help it either, which is what I was pointing at.
Okay, then,
You're talking, yeah, the 2 windows in the bedroom that is facing south, right?
Talking about these two.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually this window.
It's a
If you look at the
south-facing
top of the
elevation.
window and where the roof dies, there's not much space there. So what we're suggesting is move this window slightly over, so that
Okay,
there's
that
just
makes
more
sense.
headroom. Or alternatively, just move these over together. It is this area right here.
They're probably trying to leave enough room to put a bed between the 2 windows.
Right, and that's why they could also maybe just
Shift the
do
whole thing over.
this,
Right.
because there's room without hitting the closet.
It seems like on the, in that depiction on sheet 2, that there's more room that we're seeing than on the existing east elevation, I'm sorry, on the proposed side elevation. The actual distance between the window and the corner
It's
here
several feet in the
looks
plan.
like it's like 2 feet-ish.
Yeah,
It's
maybe
like 2
3
feet and 9 to the center of the window.
It's right here.
And so on that depiction, it looks like it's only about maybe 6 inches.
No, you're looking at
Well,
the
you're looking at the
downspout.
downspout.
Was that the downspout?
Yeah,
Oh.
the wall continues
Anyone,
from.
if somebody's gonna see that as off by 6 inches, gonna be a bird flying the next door neighbor at 20 feet up in the air.
Yeah.
So that's the.
No, I thought the
Whoever's gonna
downspout,
see this is gonna be standing on the
downspout-
sidewalk, looking in an angle, and if I could say,
this
So
is
I
true.
could,
Yeah,
if
so
I could
I-
see the 6-inch difference.
Okay, so I guess there's no
I'm-
support for number
I
3.
got some good
so I
eyes.
agree that that can be a consideration.
Okay.
Other than that, I support the project, and I think the roof, if it's 312, that's by any chance possible, that would make it look better. condition, though. Leave it as it is.
Okay. So, I'm surprised that we don't have a whole bunch of neighbors here screaming and yelling about the second story. That said, huh?
Enjoy it while you can.
That said, I'm going to leave that alone, but maybe it's the better elements being used here. Maybe it's the neighbor, the owner reaching out to the neighbors and being proactive. So these are learnings maybe for the future for other folks that are looking to develop, I guess. That aside, I think that my colleagues have touched upon all the issues that I was going to touch upon. And with the conditions that were added by Mr. Simonian, Mr. Malikian, and the removal of condition number 3 by Ms. Arzamian, I would be in support to move forward.
Making,
Yeah, consideration.
Consideration, yeah. So that's all I have. Do we want to have a reading of the conditions into the record?
sure.
And then we'll take a motion.
Okay, so the first condition I have is reduce or eliminate eave overhangs on the gable sides of the roof. The second condition, foundation planting shall be installed at the front of the residence to soften the appearance of the house and provide additional buffering. The third condition is window installation shall follow the material board.
Pictures.
Does that make sense? Are you satisfied
It's
with that?
not a material board.
It's just the pictures that they've included, the details, like
Okay.
the window.
The pictures on the material
pictures
board?
on the material
Okay.
board.
And then the fourth condition is ensure the elevations and floor plans are consistent with regard to the rear stairs. And if required, the garage shall be moved further back into the rear yard.
Okay. No, that was,
That was always a consideration.
But that
So-
was something that was, I was hoping to make a condition. To me, I think, especially that front elevation, seems, the pitch seems high, and so I was wondering at 3 to 12, which I know is doable. So I was already uncomfortable with raised foundation, but since the applicant is saying they're using the existing, I'm not so far against it, although I think at the end of the day, it's going to get reframed anyways. That said, I do think that a 3 to 12 roof pitch would help, so I would support it with that being a condition.
is there other board members that feel the same, that it should be a condition?
Fine with either or. I'm okay
It
with
could
either.
be a condition.
Okay.
That's
I'm good with either or, so I think maybe leave it a condition, a consideration, and if they do have to redo it, then,
But I
it's like
think
two.
you're a little bit more adamant about the scale.
I'm a little more adamant about
Okay.
it. I think it just looks odd, but I
Well-
would support the project without a condition. If not, I think there's support
Okay,
without it, but I think it's a good move to make it a condition.
well, let's try that. We can make it a condition, well, we can leave it out as a condition and leave it as a consideration, and we'll put it to a motion, and then if there is not support for, if there's support for adding it, then we'll go from that perspective. Is that fair enough?
Fair enough.
Okay, so I've read the 4 conditions. Now, the considerations are the proposed wall/gate south of the residence shall be moved further west in line with the proposed master bedroom.
These are considerations?
These are considerations. The wall shall be faced with stucco to match the residence. That's a consideration. The second consideration, the location of the westernmost window of bedroom 2 on the second floor shall be moved further east. The third condition is, or the third consideration, I'm sorry, is remove reconsider downspouts from the front elevation. The fourth consideration is increase the street front setback of the second floor to reduce them, to further minimize the second floor mass. And then the final consideration at this point is reduce the roof pitch to 3 and 12, further reducing the overall mass height and better integrate the front porch roof by eliminating the break in the pitch. making it one continuous roof.
If I can just jump in, the roof pitch of the patio was stated to be 2 and 12, so it won't match that pitch, and it might be a somewhat awkward transition. But, so the consideration as written isn't actually accurate in terms of matching the pitch.
So what is being,
If it's voted on to go down to, or if the applicant decides to go to 3 and, I'm sorry, if it's a consideration, it will just be that the roof pitch be dropped to 3 and 12, and then the pitch at the patio would remain at 212.
So Mr. Platt is clarifying that we should strike the language, making it one continuous roof form?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, so we're going to strike that in the consideration.
And while I'm jumping in, there was discussion about the rear downspout at the pad,
Oh,
little
yes.
step at the back, so that could be thrown in with the
I mean, that's
downspout.
something to,
Okay, remove.
yeah.
Okay, so what we're voting on are the conditions and the consideration, and the main consideration that is left there that has some divided support, it seems like is the 312 condition. So I'll take a motion with that remaining in consideration, and if we'll go from there.
And do you want to pass the gavel while you're at it? Save some time?
Sure, pass the gavel. Go ahead, Mr. Simonian.
I think you.
So I'll move to approve with conditions and considerations.
I second that.
Okay, a motion was made to approve the project with the listed considerations and conditions. This will be a roll call. Mr. Malikian,
Yes.
Ms. Arzumanian,
Yes.
Mr. Charchian,
Yes.
and Mr. Simonian.
No.
Motion carries 3-1.
All right. I'll take the.
That was fun,
yeah,
wasn't
bye.
it?
So we have
I think
another.
You should leave it there. You just leave it there. You're recusing yourself.
Oh no, we're gonna do one more thing before we.
Okay.
So although I'm going to be recusing myself for the next matter, I was wanting to take the agendas, the minutes approvals, really quickly out of order from the.
Oh, that's a
calendar
good
because
idea.
we have a big backlog of minutes, and so it shouldn't take too long. So we have the August 9, 2008 minutes. Can I get a motion for? Actually, I have, yeah. Can
Well,
we?
we're still
We're
still
2 of 3.
short.
Yeah,
We're still short.
Yeah, that's not.
We're still short.
yeah, you're going to need
We're
to
still
wait.
short. Okay, never mind. We're still short of
Need that.
the quorum to get that done, so I'm going to leave this here. At this time, then, I will be recusing myself of the next project. I will wish my colleagues good night and thank the audience for their patience. Have a good evening.
Have a good evening.
Thanks.
Simonian, you want to take over?
I shall move over. Are we ready from staff's point of view?
Sure. I'm ready to move.
All right,
Is
Good
go
evening.
ahead and start it off.
All right. Good evening and thank you. This is case number PDR 1804375 for the project site located at 424 Audrain Drive, and that is located in the R1R zone, FAR District 2. Applicant's proposing to add 412 square feet to the first floor and add a new approximately 1,100 square foot second floor, and to also remodel the existing facade to a more contemporary appearance from the existing ranch style. Originally developed in 1956, the site is an 8,925 square foot interior lot located mid-block on the south side of Audrain Drive, and is currently developed with a approximately 2,000 square foot one-story house and attached garage. In terms of site planning, the addition to the first floor and the new second floor modifies the original building footprint in an appropriate manner, with the house centrally sited on the lot The existing street front setback for the house and attached garage will be maintained, and the existing landscaping will remain as is. As it relates to mass and scale, the new second floor is considerably smaller than the first floor, relieving the sense of mass by providing setbacks of varying depths. The neighborhood features a mix of 1- and 2-story homes, including a neighboring 2-story home to the north. Given this context, the applicant's proposal to construct a new 2-story or a new second-story addition is appropriate. The massing of the addition is broken up through the use of changes in facade planes, stepping the new second floor in from the first floor, and changes in materials. The redesign of the house and the addition features hipped and gable roof forms. While the roof pitches of the new and existing roof forms are inconsistent, the overall design is appropriate, and part of the reason why some of the existing roof, or why the roof pitches are different, has to do with the applicant's keeping portions of the existing roof to stay under the 50% demolition threshold in the zoning code. In terms of architectural detailing, the surrounding neighborhood features a mix of styles, and the proposed style change is appropriate. The new windows will be fiberglass block frame in a combination of casement and fixed, and feature external grids. 6 of the existing vinyl windows will remain, and they are not visible from the street. They're located at the rear and on the southwest side of the house. The proposed materials for the addition and facade remodel includes a new standing seam metal roof, plaster, stone cladding at the first floor entry porch, and horizontal hardy siding for the new second floor. Staff's received 2 emails from adjacent neighbors in support of the project. All comments received are on file with the planning department and are part of the public record. Copies of all comments have been provided to you for your consideration. Staff is recommending approval of the project with 1 condition as noted in the staff report. Additionally, I would like to add a recommended condition of approval that the applicant provide details for staff review and approval, showing how the materials wrap the corners and how the different materials meet, like the stone cladding with the wood. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for staff? So, I have questions, and maybe when Mr. Garagos comes up, maybe I can ask both. But here's my question. I'm looking at the square footages, and it's all over the place. I mean, it's literally all over the place. And I'm trying to figure out what is the actual size of the building that we're, and the reason that I was started looking at this is that the survey list is being proposed to be 3499, so one square foot shy of the 3-car garage, right?
Correct.
But when I'm looking at the project summary, saying that we're adding 412 square feet of floor area to the existing house. The existing house is 2092, right? And on the site plan, when I'm looking at this, it only has one area that I'm finding that it says we're removing 123 square feet. So if I take 123 out of the equation, and if I add the 1183, which is that number is different than what it's shown on the survey list, and it's also different than what's on the site plan, which is 1201. We're over the 3,500.
I would defer to the architect
Okay.
on why the numbers are different.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, that was my only number question that I had.
Okay.
Maybe we should ask them.
Well, on that note, there are 2 speaker cards, one for the architect, Mike Gricos, and the other one for the owner. Who would like to start? Mr. Gricos, welcome.
Mike Argus, 2155 Verdugo, number 614 Montrose, 91020. I can address that number. I'm going to start on some other topics, but I can address that first. We were pushing and pulling, and that is The site plan number is not correct. The project info is correct. We were pushing and pulling things, so that was a number that wasn't. So the correct numbers are on the project info sheet, so that.
Okay, but
That is
if that number is correct, then your survey is, the survey list, that number goes up to like 1 square foot short. So
Yeah,
are we looking at 3487, or are we looking at 3499, or are we looking? So
if
the
you-
numbers that you have on your site plan, it's not.
there's that one, there was an error on that one, just because we had been pushing and pulling. But the project info numbers are correct. That is what,
Okay,
if you go by the numbers on the project info, those are
Okay.
correct. And I can
fair enough.
crack that on the final document.
Okay, all right, thank you.
In general, we were looking at many different styles on the house. We're doing quite a considerable side yard setback on both. On the second floor, it's like 25 feet. So we really tried to pull it in, doing a very strong mass in the center. I was sort of taking a version of, you've probably seen sort of I forgot how you phrase your house style. How do you phrase your house style? Traditional, you said transitional.
Don't remember.
I know. I can't remember. It's basically, if you've seen the style where there's a lower floor plaster wall and then there's a wrapping of horizontal siding on the second floor of that style home that was done sort of in the 50s in that era. So it's sort of like when you transitioned from a traditional home to contemporary style at that period of time. And it seemed like it was a nice home to sort of play off of some of the mid-centuries in the same area and then some of the ranch styles. It seemed like a good starting point. So we did a nice, strong central massing and did a low-pitch roof on the majority of it. There was some areas towards the back, which were areas that had already been remodeled that had slightly different pitches on those, and for the sake of the percentages, we weren't modifying those. It doesn't really affect the style in a sense that you don't really sense those different pitches. They're very much around the corner. So we are being consistent on everything that you would see experientially from the public way. All in all, keeping it sort of clean line, horizontal, and sort of emphasizing the horizontal elements, 3 and 12 pitch, keeping it low and modest, other than the square footage. But I could provide, if you wanted to make conditions for providing additional detailing on the stone, that would obviously be part of what we would do in a submittal package. So the plan check submittals, that would be fine to add all those items on. If you have any questions.
As far as the stone material is concerned, is this the right depiction?
Yes.
More or less?
Yeah. We didn't want to do the thin ledger stone. I'm just not a big fan of it. It's funny that even though that's a real stone, I think it tends to look phony. Actually, some of the manufactured products I think actually have a better natural feel sometimes, and that was one that we picked out of a very large selection. So the owner's very comfortable with that one.
Is there a perspective or some sort of
The one on that's about an A2, A3, right above the colored elevation. So we're trying to, if you notice, the street goes up on the right-hand side, so I really didn't like how the hip on that right bedroom was so much lower than the road. So that's one of the reasons that we went with gable ends, because I didn't like the idea of it getting kind of top-heavy, so I was trying to emphasize. The gable end, I think, helps add massing to the base. And also that style, I think, works nicely with emphasizing the lower. You're sort of creating a water line under the upper windows, which I think makes the first floor read stronger, minimizing the second floor. And also by doing a strong element up there, keeping a strong, simple form, I think it helps reinforce that horizontal line.
So you're talking about this pad? Are you talking about this pad?
Yes, right in there, yes. That water line there.
Well, what is this?
That is just a ledger opening on that porch area. There is a window that's inside, so we didn't want to obstruct it too much.
And your perspective's not showing up, so I'm not,
Yeah.
I mean, you haven't called out what that is, so.
Yeah,
So
it
it's
would,
just a band of stucco or something?
yeah, it would be a stucco that would, a hard trowel that would give the impression of a sandstone. It would be a washed plaster. And again, I could detail that and spec that as a condition if you want. That's fine.
And you were trying to show this ledger as more of an architectural statement?
Exactly, yeah. I think it helps, I never like to see stone just sort of stop at an opening. I like it would have some kind of lintel involved.
But on your perspective, you're showing a stone, some sort of a base, something that is grounding, but over here, it's just a kind of off-center, kind of an odd. That's why I wanted to see the perspective, and now I'm looking at it, I'm more confused.
Yeah, there is, I believe that shows, yeah, there is a slight pilaster that pulls out on the right-hand side from the wall. You can see it on the floor plan. If you look to the left of you. Bottom left corner, bottom left plan, floor plan. There is a slight pilaster that pulls out of that side. The support for the lintel.
While Mr. Malakian is considering that, just a question from my end. You know, the shape as we're talking about it, that entrance, on the left side, you know, you have that slanting column feature, which is quite nice. But then as you're pointing out on the left side, it's just something that pops out. Was there a way to kind of center that piece? Because it seems as though it's such a prominent piece and it's such an important piece, so.
Yeah, the
Was there a
tricky
way-
part about that whole entry was the given location of that front door. That was very difficult to deal with. So since we were maintaining that entry space, it was a little bit of the tail wagging the dog on that one, unfortunately. So that's one of the reasons I did the sloping angle. I thought that a column that would normally come down there square, I thought it felt too light, not really strong enough, heavy enough visually to support the upper element. I mean, we could close the opening up slightly more. I was just concerned of how it reacted with the front door and the window that's behind. I was trying, it was betwixt and between how much to enclose, how much to leave open.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. So it seems like you're leaving the existing windows intact
On the portion of the
on
rear.
the west elevation.
You're right, on the portion of the rear and on the west side. Those are areas that were remodeled several years ago that they don't want to touch. They're not visible from the street. So the sense is to leave those. The kitchen was remodeled. They redid all those windows.
So they're actually okay coming into the house that you see all kinds, one type of window, and then they come around, they go spend this kind of money, and then within the whole space, I mean, it's an open floor plan.
You know, the windows, it would be an issue.
So you
If
come
look-
in and you look through the living room and everything is just a completely different window. When you turn around and it's a different window.
I think the dark, you'd probably still do a lighter colored trim on the interior. So although the sticking of it might be darker, I think it's kind of a subtle element. There's no sticking on the other ones that are back there. So I don't, it would be one of those issues where you had sticking on the house or front of a house, and then you didn't have it on the back, which happens all the
And
time.
what kind of windows are they? Or it's existing? Are
The
they
existing windows?
Yeah.
Yeah, the existing are vinyl.
vinyl?
Yeah.
Can they be painted?
They usually say the vinyl can't. It's a fiberglass that can be painted. So,
If I can jump in here, the planning division is kind of we're discussing big concepts of design review that are also going to extend toward the board in the future. And we're very much leaning toward a focus on what the public experience is, the reason we do design review in terms of how it affects the public realm and the public streets and what we see. This would be a case where if it's not visible from the public, I would recommend that the board not focus on it as much, even though it may be a lesser design, or you may be concerned that the applicant may not recognize that they're going to have rooms that have two kinds of windows.
So my next question is that when I'm looking at the side and the windows that they're proposing and the doors they're proposing in the back has nothing to do with what it's in the front, the new ones. So I shouldn't be expressing my concern about that?
Nothing is in black and white yet. I'm just indicating a direction we're moving to free up to kind of focus staff time on the things that really affect the community and not to focus time on the things that don't. And ultimately, that will extend to the board. So I just want to throw it out there as a way to think about this. We've raised this before with the board in terms of not focusing as intensely on the details and certain issues on the parts of homes or any building that aren't experienced by the public.
The new doors that are on the back, the three, those are new doors that would match the new ones on the new structures on the front. So those are all consistent. The only windows that aren't, there's a single door on the side out of the kitchen.
But the ones that are being proposed in the back are like a contemporary, no muttons, no dividers.
Right, which what's traditional to do on a view home. You might have sticking on the front of the house, and you wouldn't have sticking on the rear. That happens all the time. That's, I think, an appropriate reaction on a view lot to do that. So I don't see that as an issue. And plus, it's consistent with the other existing windows that are on the back, the few that are there.
Any other questions, Mr. Malik?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Domingo, the owner. Oh, I'm sorry. Please state your name for the record. Is it Catherine Domingo?
Catalina Santo Domingo. I'm the
Welcome.
owner. My husband and I, Lloyd Scott, are here. First of all, I wanted to thank the planning staff for working with us these past few months and providing their input and providing a supportive report for the project. Also, we wanted to thank the board members for your consideration. Just to provide some insight, my husband and I first moved into this home about 16 years ago. At the time, we basically thought to ourselves that this is the in-between home. Since then, we've grown to love the neighborhood. We've met several of our neighbors and have become very good friends with our neighbors. And so in that time frame, and fast forward 16 years later, we're really committed to basically in this particular home. We now have a daughter, and we're very excited to just really have a home in this particular place and not be the old home. And it's the old 1950s home with the 1950s style and everything associated with that. We love the idea of being in this neighborhood. It's a very family-friendly place, and we have our holiday parties and all of that. So we do appreciate it. But given the space that's there and the old 1950s kitchen, which we had remodeled a couple of years back, I guess kind of just looking at the whole conversation and the windows, had we known at the time that we're going to be taking the adventure of a second floor addition, we probably would have had other considerations in terms of trying to match up all of these windows. This is the house in which our neighbor crashed onto our rooftop. And so that kind of pushed us into that kitchen remodel earlier than we had thought. So
Crashed into your rooftop.
yes. So a few years back, one of our neighbors across the street was driving down their driveway, and they missed making the left turn, drove over the neighbor's yard, and landed on our roof. So it's still one of the, I guess, most Googled little events in Glendale. Car lands on roof. It wasn't planned at the time for us to do the remodel, but it certainly made sense at the time for us to address the remodel at the time. Now that we are at a point and we're ready to do this addition, the yard doesn't really accommodate any additions to the rear. So we really didn't have much space to consider in the backyard. It slopes down in the backyard. So going above made sense for us, and we hope you would consider and support that.
Okay, thank you very much. The next speaker is Vaik Hartunian.
I have some pictures. Can I leave it up there?
Yes, you could give it to staff, but since Mr. Kiesel's not there,
Like to reference it.
are they the same image?
No, different images. Different images.
Oh,
I made
I
one
see.
copy, I'm sorry.
I see.
There's just it's a good angle for my. All right. My name is Vi Kartunian. My wife and I and our 2 children live next door to the subject property on the left east side, facing their property. This subject property was submitted for proposal a few years ago, and at the time was not approved. One of the main reasons was because of privacy. If I recall, they were informed that they would like to pursue a renovation. They must reconstruct their plans and provide a privacy to the neighbors. I want to make a point first that I'm not opposed to the renovation for this property. However, I am concerned that as the next door property, the proposed construction will definitely impact our property and our privacy. Our street is a steep slope. Each of the properties are tiered. The renovation proposed will take away from the tiered look of our block. As a mock-up is a significant and encompass the majority of the existing house, which is single story right now. If you look at the street level, it is now tall building on our street. If you look at reference number 5, you can see how the street is really sloped, so it shows really high from our house. The mock-up also extends to cover a large portion of their property. So important to note that there's a slope on the hillside extending throughout the east side, which is our side of the house, and also slopes to the back side of their house. So all of the slope extending throughout the back of the property limits their flat surface. And if you reference to picture 1 and 3, you can see it clearly there. The mock-ups provided in the notice covered significant portion of the flat area, which I think comes out to like 3,600 square feet of the total unit to the 8925, the lot. That's a big mass there, considering there's a huge amount of slope on the east side and the back side. The east side left facing the property is the border to my property. When extending and expanding to cover the majority of their flat surface, they are now encroaching onto our property. If you reference to page 2 and 4, pictures 2 and 4, you can see from our yard how it's looking down. Looking from my property, their tiers is now towering building directly looking upon our pool, the yard, and our master bedroom window. Picture 1 and 3 again shows that too. So there's a short brick border between our property and theirs. I think it's about 4 or 5 feet tall. We currently look at a slope which is often covered by ivy or dry plants. Again, reference 1 and 2. We want to ensure that the space is being built does not overlook into our property, override, and provide us with our privacy. And I did notice the drawing, the mock-up drawing of the house. There's a lot of windows and a lot of balcony looking down straight to our backyard where our pool is. And then the other side of the house, on the west side, there's a lot less windows than our side. And if it's the sloping down, the street sloping down, you can tell it should be, I think it should be the other way around. But if the plans get approved, I request into consideration the items presented. Maybe they can plant some trees, tall trees, to give us some privacy in between. But I don't have any space. It's all concrete. The planting has to be on their side. I don't know what kind of trees they can plant that goes tall enough to cover all the way the view of it. And maybe like bamboo or windbreakers would do the job. I don't know. And whatever they do, if it's plant, if the solution is plants, but we have to consider keeping it clean, because as of right now, it's always dry ivy. And from our side, when you're looking from out there, you can't see it. But from our view, all you see is dried ivy. It doesn't look good. And I'm hoping the tall plants or something will give us the privacy at the same time, but they have to be able to maintain it, because it's going to be on their side, the plant. They don't have any room. It's concrete on our side. That's all I have to say. Again, I'm not objecting to it. I like the house. The only thing I want them is to consider our privacy. We have 2 little kids. We're in the pool all the time in the summer. And the way their house sits is like behind, a little bit back of ours already. So if they're putting 3,600 square feet on a 8,900 something square feet lot, which a lot of it is, there's a lot of slope area. So I don't know how much of it is really flat. It's really takes over the privacy. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. So I have a question for staff. We've had, in the past, we've had conditions or consideration, mostly conditions, given to us when we had windows facing neighbor, and either it was recommended to the windows to be raised up or eliminated. How does the proposal that is looking straight back as the privacy, as the neighbor brought up, how does that meet the city guidelines and what the staff think?
So as it relates to the windows facing this neighbor to the south, we have authority when it comes to privacy from public rooms. Private rooms, bedrooms, we can't take into consideration for window locations. That means based off the floor plan, the garage windows, we can talk about, and then, Jay, would you say the hallway window on the second floor?
Well, the hallway window doesn't count as a public room. In the past, we've given the board direction that if you think that this can help with privacy issues, you have to find a design rationale for doing it. You cannot make the changes just based on privacy. There is the balcony off the master that you could either remove or relocate, or you could talk about floor plan changes or something else that might mitigate this. I think there have been a few times where the board has changed the shapes of windows, and I believe you're probably overstepping the code. So it would be best if you do want to make a change to really think about it as a design issue.
Okay. Well, thank you for the clarification. Mr. Malikian, is there any other post questions, I guess, to that? No. The next speaker is Gregian. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Greg Yen. We're the neighbor to the north or to the west of Scott and Kathy. We were in front of design review probably about 8 or 9 years ago, and our house has set the precedent to build the 2-story houses on that block. Our architect is actually sitting right there, Mr. Garagos, and we appreciate the design elements that he's put into the projects in the neighborhood. Scott and Kathy have been wonderful neighbors for the past 16 years, obviously persevered through a lot to stay in the neighborhood. The first project went before us in design review and unfortunately was rejected. They had the car land on the roof, had to go through that. And they have a beautiful young daughter, Caitlin, who, and we would very much love to see them, grow up in the neighborhood and continue to be the wonderful neighbors that they are. I know from working with Mr. Garagos that, he's very considerate of, the neighbors' concerns. And as we went through their project, we designed very closely to try and minimize impacts on neighbors. And I feel like when I look at the design of the house that they're proposing, there's many of the same thoughtfulness and elements of that as well. We're very much in support of the project. Scott and Kathy are very, wonderful people that, just add a lot to our neighborhood, and just want to say we're very much in support. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Garagos, you get 2 minutes rebuttal.
Yeah, we, again, obviously caring about neighbors, so we took these 2 shots, just so we're clear. That's actually the existing view you have of the pool right now, okay, the top one. And that's right on the edge, and then that is what you create. So it's very similar in effect. This is the view angle you would have from the deck above. They're very much open to doing, we could do Carolina Cherry or something, that is their hillside. They could maintain that section. It is a view lot, so I think trying to take the view windows away seems onerous and not really effective. So I think there is a landscape solution to that, but you have to understand there already is, an existing condition now that is that. So it's really this piece down here that would be the difference. But they're open to doing some kind of vegetation correction rather than trying to do an architectural correction.
And the intent would be to do some sort of a vertical landscaping feature that would be tall enough to
Right, tall enough to
block
obscure
the
the pool
second.
but still maintain the view. I think that they were open to that. We had talked about it before, and I think it would be a good solution.
Okay. Do we have any more questions for Mr. Garagos? So with that, we'll go ahead and close the public portion. Mr. Melikian, you want to start us
Sure.
off?
So, again, I drove by the property and it seemed like it had some contour, some elevation changes, and especially the street is a pretty steep street. And not having the survey, it's really not really helping. Also, the site plan is not really, you have the adjacent property diagram, but with the survey, kind of not knowing the grades, it's kind of disappointing. As far as the privacy, I'm very concerned about that. I wasn't expecting the neighbor to come out, but I hear, and I would be concerned. Somebody's building a house and it's kind of, all the windows are looking down. So, but it is a substantial setback from the property line. So that, I mean, they have a little bit larger than normal setback, which is almost like 16 feet, and then they're adding another 8 or 9 feet, so you're about 25 plus feet, 23 feet. Actually, I'm sorry, it's, about 25. It needs to, if a vegetation, as the neighbor came out, is the answer, I'm okay with that. But it needs to be mature trees. It can't just be one of those that they plant and they hope in 5 years or 10 years it'll grow to its maturity. So it has to be a mature tree, and it has to be at least the height of the, at least 10 to 15-foot tall trees, that it has a complete substantial blockage. It would block the view from down below, and hopefully the same view will remain from the new second-story addition. I'm a little bit, I'm not convinced with what staff said about our preview and how we can look, because this is the first I'm hearing.
Well, it's not even set yet. It's something that's
Yeah,
being
and
discussed.
and like previous.
Just a preview.
Yeah, and
But it is
the
a
last
direction.
condition that to move the window, adjust the window, that's far in the back, and no one can see it, but staff had placed a condition to move the window inches. So looking at that and looking at this, for us not to be able to comment on, it kind of holds my hand tight and not able to.
But I don't think that's set yet.
Right.
In other words, that's something that's
So,
being considered,
so
if I
I
understand
do
staff correctly.
am
It's not
conscious.
set yet as a general direction.
Right.
No, I think it's the direction we'll be moving in, but it's not official.
Okay.
So I just wanted you to consider it.
So I just want to talk about the front. So I think I like the front. It presents itself and it has a really nice base, but I think it has a little bit of a lacking. So I think what I would do is I would repeat this angled wall to this end, and I would carry the same stone down similar to this edge, and create a border of some sort. So this has the angle here as this rather than this little tip. And also maybe rather than having this kind of a shape, maybe the steps are either set in the middle, maybe pots, or the whole thing is a step going up to this area. Somehow this becomes the not just a leftover. I'm okay with the band. I'm not sure what these are. If these are just a accent or is it just a attic vent? There's no detail. Also, you have two different types of windows that are being two different types of window placement. One is going against the wood siding. The other is going against the stucco. So the details that we have, it's very bland and doesn't have enough information for me to understand what is being proposed. So the other thing is that some of the inconsistency of the end eave details that we have here versus the back, which is, I understand this is an existing. Again, I can't, I would, if I'm spending that much money, I would carry the whole thing throughout the house rather than just do half and not touch the rest. I'm not convinced that the rear windows, the single divider versus the double divider, those are, to me, I think to look at the exterior, having a consistent window detailing and everything else, carrying that into the house, I think that's one of the positive features of doing a new addition and new details there. I would suggest for them to kind of look at least paint the windows to match. You can see from the side as you're driving down, you're going to be able to see these as you're coming down. So this is already there. And as you're coming around, then these are going to be, they're already adding details and features there to kind of try to come up with something. But I think it just lacks. It's like half is done and half is not. So overall, I'm fine. I'm not sure the species that I would condition for the placement. I would leave it up to a landscape architect to decide on that. But I would definitely want staff to see a landscape plan and a irrigation plan to make sure that it is maintained and it's not something that is placed temporarily. So that area should be done by a landscape architect. And especially that it's facing south, something that is not going to die and the soil condition is going to support the planting.
Thank you, Mr. Malikian. Ms. Arzumanian?
Oh, I'm sorry, one last thing, sorry. I think all the data, whatever it's being posted, everything should be consistent with the, like the architect mentioned, Mr. Garagos, the data that he has on the cover page, the numbers, not the site plan. So the site plan numbers aren't good. Sorry.
No problem. I think I'm with Mr. Malikian about the windows. It just, overall, it would look much nicer if everything matched and you had sort of like uniform colors at least. So if there is a solution to make sure they're just one color, that would be great. That would help a lot. I like your idea of the front door. This is kind of awkward, one piece, so I really like that architecture solution to this. So that should be considered. And about the vegetations, there should be landscape plan, and we should figure that out. So the south side is covered. Other than that, so it's fine.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ms. Arzumanian. I have no further comments as well in addition to what's been already said. I do support the project. And so with that, could maybe staff review the conditions? We can't have cross-communication. Well, this is cross-communication. And so we're going to have staff go over the conditions, and if there's any ambiguity, you could nod, and then I'll kind of ask you up, and then we could discuss details. But I'm pretty sure that we're going to be able to get it, and we can't have cross-communication. Public portion is closed. This is what happens. When I give you 2 minutes, somebody else raises their hand, and all anarchy breaks loose. So with that, staff, if you would go through the conditions.
Okay, well, we'll save the one we don't understand for last. The existing staff condition from the report was to indicate gutter and downspout locations as well as trash storage area. We'll keep that.
Mr. Charchian would really appreciate that.
Yes. In his absence, we'll make sure we follow through. There was a question about the attic vents at the front, which aren't exactly clear on the drawing.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if they're attic vents or they're just kind of ornamental, kind of an accent.
Now, one thought of when you turn the corner, there's a large gable on the west elevation that has siding in the gable. I don't know if adding siding at the front would be too much siding there, but it certainly would tie the floors together, or just clarify those vents if you're okay with them.
I mean, you can remove it as far as I'm concerned. I don't think it's doing anything.
And if they want to keep them, is that okay, or?
I mean, is it just a wood? I mean, they just need to
What is it?
detail that and show.
We don't know what it is. If it's applied wood
I
or
don't either,
vent
so.
or, okay, so we will get clarification from the architect. And if it is a vent, you're okay with it, or you'd rather see it go away? It's a strange location for a vent in a
Yeah,
garage.
and I don't
because-
even think it's gonna be a vent. I mean, I don't think they have a ceiling there, so I don't know, to be
Right.
honest with you, I don't know. I think there's a bedroom there. One of them has a bedroom. the
Yeah,
other
one
a
could be a
garage.
vent and one wouldn't
Wouldn't
want
be
a
a vent,
so.
so I would probably remove it. I mean, if I, if,
Okay, so we'll delete those features. We need to receive details for the window installation in the two different conditions, the stucco installation versus the siding installation. To have the details for that. Vista had mentioned that we need to have a condition in terms of the junctions between materials and how the materials wrap at the corners. So we'll add that. Two commissioners did mention the color change for the existing vinyl windows. Vinyl is not paintable, so I think it would either be replace those windows to match or leave the windows.
But what else do you have in the form of conditions?
Hey, I got a lot of conditions here.
Can I suggest the windows that are visible from the street should be consistent, from public view? And then if they want to keep the back. or
Okay, well, we could actually do a field verification of whether or not those windows
Okay.
are visible.
In the field, because of the downslope nature on a drain from top to bottom, you really can't see them. That's why I kind of didn't leave it as being any kind of condition, because it's so invisible from the street. I can verify it again, but in going
I'll
on-
leave it up to
You can't
staff.
see the
Okay.
east ones?
We
Really?
could make it a consideration, subject to staff verification, that
Right.
if it's visible, then,
Subject for board members driving by 6 months from now to see them.
I think I have photos of that.
No,
Okay,
no,
so-
that's fine. I was there, I saw them, that's why I could see them while I was there, but
So maybe staff could
I'll
do a
rely on
revisit
staff to
Yep.
make
to
that
confirm.
That's fine.
Staff to confirm. There are different eave conditions shown on the drawings between the front and the back. I'm presuming you would like consistency, and the eave detail at the back is the more simple detail that is closer to what's...
Let it be all consistent. I mean, if they're
Okay.
gonna wrap that around, does that mean that the entire, so if these details are wrapped around, so they have a flat eave going all the way across, and whereas these are, this is just a kind of an open,
Is this existing?
so that's all.
Yes.
Okay, at the rear, the existing eave condition is just a simple fascia coming down at an angle, rather than having the boxed condition that they're showing on the front and the upper gable. So maybe we'll...
Yeah, so if it's a new addition, it should be consistent. If it's the old, so they can,
Okay, so
See
the
the
addition, all eaves should be consistent.
right.
That's
Okay,
an easy way to put it.
We have a condition to provide landscaping as a buffer between the downslope property and the subject property, with trees or other plantings of at least 10 to 15-foot height at the time of planting, and a mature condition, plus an irrigation plan for that area, taking into consideration the orientation and all that. I'm not sure if this needs to be a condition in terms of the size data. Is that,
I mean, that's dealt with in plan check.
What do you mean size?
The
square
project data, the square footages,
Oh,
that'll
okay.
be verified through
Okay.
plan check. I will keep in mind,
Okay.
keeping,
okay. And then, Mr. Malikian, we weren't sure quite when we were discussing the entrance.
Oh,
The
So-
right, we understand the right side you want to have canted
So
like
do
the
you-
left side.
okay, so should I mark on the, is it okay?
could you mark the black and white one?
Yeah, I'll mark the black one.
Sorry.
So you see how this is angled? And this is straight down? So I think this should be angled the same way as this. Right? So, and if there is a cricket or some left over, it should be pushed back so that this becomes just part of the roof if possible. So this is all stone as it is. So whatever the angle is, it looks consistent. rather than one straight line here and then this jog and whatever it is. So these are all straight. And then here, so this would be the same condition as here, so that when you're looking at this, you can see part of this, so it's breaking up. And so this is like, you can imagine that this whole thing is the same. Then he has stone here, which it shouldn't. So the stone should be just that, and this, the way that this detail is fine, they can carry it over,
Bring the steps over.
or they can have a smaller step. So that's all I'm saying, so that this is straight, this is angle, same angle as that, and that is there.
Got it. Okay. So,
Is that clear?
So we could maybe keep a sketch that Mr. Malakian just
yeah, we'll have
did
that,
as
and we'll
some
write,
sort
we'll
of
write the condition based on that.
incorporated into the condition, okay?
And that's everything that I've got.
Okay. I did promise, Mr. Kirigas, was there any confusion as to what we said? I know you're not agreeing with the last part, but if there is, come up.
You need to speak in front of the mic.
You need to reopen the hearing.
Jog back.
Uh,
I was just concerned that.
Place your name for the record.
Mike Aragus?
And I have a very specific question for you. You said that there was some confusion, and so what I'm just saying is, based on the design that's been depicted, that seems pretty clear to me. Is there any confusion on that specific portion, or was there something else that you were referring to?
Can I walk to it and see what he actually drew? I couldn't see what he drew. I'm only saying I'm concerned because it's in a notch, and if he's sloping a section, I didn't know, is it sloping down through the wall or just above the roof? Is it just above the roof?
What I'm saying
You could
is, and I'm gonna, this is just a clarification. Right now, this perspective, so you have this angle coming down.
Yes.
The same angle should go down here.
Absolutely.
So that this is consistent, and you don't need to add stone to this. This can be whatever it
Yes.
is. There's no, you can build up with the metal flashing, whatever you want. And the way that you have the stone here, I'm fine with, because all your drawings are completely different. All I'm saying is that just keep this down there, keep this there, add your whatever lentil. And then here, you have a half section of a step. All I'm saying is, also we carry this across, so that it makes some sense. The way it's just, it's like half there, half not there, so.
The sloping was fine. I misunderstood it. It looked like it was happening below the.
I see. Okay, good.
Thank you. It's all very good.
Thank you.
Very good.
I still have a question if I have a chance here.
No, I don't want to open the hearing. There was a question regarding the architecture and the main entrance, and that's an important enough of an element that I thought it was appropriate for the architect to ask the confusing part of his analysis, I guess, or understanding, I should say, and that's been cleared up, and we're not opening up the hearing again. So with that, will someone entertain a motion?
I just want to, one clarification. The tree height says 10 to 15 feet. It's too vague. I think it should be at least 15 feet or more.
And do you want to say 24-inch box?
It needs to be mature tree. It can't just, it could be a 24-inch box, a 36-inch box, whatever.
So minimum 24-inch.
Minimum 24, as long as the height is there, and it's dense. It's not.
And that's a big tree, by the way.
So, yeah,
Can't have cross communication.
Yeah.
Sorry.
it's
Being recorded, that's why. So when you say something from the crowd, people at home don't understand what's happening. That's why.
Yeah, the height is gonna be taller than, it'll go up to the middle of one of the windows, so
If you could give us some latitude, because we often hear from the arborists that planting larger, more mature trees with larger box sizes on slopes is difficult, and they prefer to have trees that actually do grow.
thus, we would have used a survey to determine that. If we don't have a survey, so I don't know. So that's why I say you need a landscape architect to make that decision.
Okay,
I would-
but we have the latitude, if the landscape architect says a 10-foot tree is going to survive and something bigger might not. We just-
Well, I mean,
we
a
just heard this
10-foot
before on other
tree,
projects.
a 10-foot tree and a
I've
15-foot tree.
planted a lot of 24-inch trees on very steep hillsides,
And if,
and they've survived.
my preference would be a 15-foot, 24-inch box. If the architect says that you cannot plant it that close to the edge, then my answer would be push it in more. So don't get it to the edge. But the idea is that to hide those windows. It's that or getting rid of those windows and leaving just north. That's how I would, it's just the.
I think it's a pretty clear condition.
And don't you mean that it's not to hide those windows, but it's to buffer the mass of the house?
But,
from
I'm sorry,
property
not
below?
to hide the windows, but provide the privacy that you would need, so.
I'm going somewhere different.
Right.
It's not a privacy issue, it's a disguising the mass of the house
Disguise-
issue, which is then a design issue.
That is true.
That's under your purview, so.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Well said.
So do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve with conditions.
I'll second it.
Roll call vote. Board Member Arzumanian,
Yes.
Board Member Malikian.
Yes.
Chair Simonian.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes.
And since we don't have any more minutes to approve, I take it we're done for the day?
I believe so.
Wow.
Motion to
Adjourn.
adjourn.